Hello, and welcome to Locutors of Trek, the podcast where we talk about the people, places, and things of Star Trek. So, replicate yourself a Romulan ale or your Syntha selection of choice and join us far beyond the stars.
Locutors of Trek.
Program initiated. Enter when ready.
Koi keles buglod, koi bukbe bu, yakba makba jejuvi, saimak tumeyo, mashang manang mahakcho, nabeyam majak voku, yakba jekbe jeju kijdok fa pubadi bubarik majutak kamomev kamojutak mao.
Come, join us for blood wine and we will talk of war. Hi, it's Dave.
And Davan.
We're Locutors of Trek.
And plain simple Tailors.
Welcome back. Today, we talk of war. Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori, it said. Well, we'll see.
What is it, or what is it not good for?
Indeed.
But before we get into it, because we keep forgetting, you can contact us about anything you've heard or would like to hear from this podcast.
Sure, yeah.
At locutorsoftrek@gmail.com, or you can chat with us on our only social media page at the moment. Between the two of us, we can handle one currently.
That may exceed our... It certainly exceeds my capacities alone.
Locutors of Trek on Facebook.
Got it.
The Targs of War.
Cannon to the left of them.
Cannon to the right, volleyed and thundered.
So, war is an exciting sort of storytelling motif, for better or worse, I guess. And in terms of being a setting of grand space adventure, whose character, as it's fleshed out over the various series, is one of galactic civilizations, great and small, bumping up against each other on this sort of cosmic stage. It does seem sort of part and parcel of the Star Trek setting that we find war cropping up as a historical artifact, as a present reality, as an impending danger, as a threat, you know, in all sorts of ways.
Yeah, explored probably the most in Deep Space Nine as a theme.
Certainly, its later seasons give a kind of long-form, almost grueling depiction of the front in war and the home front at various points. Yeah, Enterprise does a bit of lifting on that front as well.
Definitely. Yep.
But yes,
and the other series just with a few pointed moments.
Yeah.
Pointed episodes.
Yeah, and we get some really interestingly pointed episodes in it.
Some great ones.
Yeah, which allow for kinds of comment on the facets of war or the ramifications or implications or the reality of war that we don't often highlight in terms of real conflict, at least not in sort of major media stuff, for various geopolitical purposes, I'm sure. The story of the Federation itself is interesting in that it's not born of war, but combat, violent encounters, accidental or intentional, have formed part of Federation history, even as they become a society increasingly devoted to peacemaking and diplomacy.
They have different ages of militarization, I guess you could say. You know, kind of the golden age of Jean-Luc Picard, and you know, he doesn't even see Starfleet as a military so much, it doesn't seem.
No.
And certainly Jonathan Archer didn't either. They were just explorers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Jonathan Archer would more likely have described himself as an astronaut.
And Kirk, yes.
In
true.
that sense, right? Like even cleaving closer to that. I mean, NASA has its sort of military elements in that most of the astronauts are, you know, test pilots and Air Force people and that sort of thing. Although there are loads of scientists as well. But
and then Kirk would see himself as more of an explorer, I would think. And, you know, Janeway's a scientist, but in Deep Space Nine we see some soldiers.
Yeah.
And some warriors, I think.
Yeah, we sure do.
Which brings us to our first little segment of the day.
Yes, indeed.
our top 5 warriors of Star Trek. Why don't I just take her away here, Dave, and you just pipe
Sure.
up with anything that seems relevant.
Absolutely.
I don't really have an order, so I'm going to have to make that up as I go. And I'm also cheating.
So the vague parameters for this list before you announced your cheatitude were sort of single characters, ideally.
Yes.
That we consider great warriors within this canon.
Yes.
Great.
Now, I was thinking, how do I define a great warrior? The warriors I was thinking of when trying to come up with this list are all very different.
Okay.
So I'm thinking I have to come up with some parameters here. So I thought I would consult something. Such as The Art of War.
Sit at the feet of a master.
By Sun Tzu. And I thought, Sun Tzu may be able to figure out who the top 5 warriors are.
That's a great way to
better
structure
than
the
myself.
notion.
Better
Yeah,
than
yeah.
myself. So, Dave.
Okay.
I'm cheating a little bit. I have a little more than 5.
A few more than... Oh, I see.
Probably
Are they grouped
6.
into 5 groups?
You know what? I can easily group them into 5. No. 6 groups. 6 groups. So.
He's doing jazz with his list.
Yep.
Folks. He's doing jazz.
Let's do a number. Let's say number 6 here.
Okay.
Great results can be achieved with small forces. He who is prudent and lies in wait for an enemy who is not will be victorious. If your opponent is of choleric temper, seek to irritate him, pretend to be weak, that he may grow arrogant. Any idea who I may be talking about there?
Well, there were a few people that occurred to me while you were talking. The sense of lulling an overconfident enemy into a position of defeat is certainly something that that brings me to thinking about, say, the back and forth between Tomalak and Picard.
Oh, wow.
On a number of episodes.
Interesting.
Right?
Very interesting.
Or, for that matter, it also brought me from there to Eddington and Cisco. Their whole play of wills and of tempers and of testing each other's metal and all that sort of stuff. But I'm just going to go out. I'm probably wrong on this, but I'm going to say Cal Hudson.
Major Kira Nerys.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. She's a perfect choice for that. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I was just, those particular quotes from The Art of War made me think of her just growing up as, a freedom fighter, terrorist, I mean, the rank is mostly irrelevant in my list, but, she was kind of an unwilling warrior in a sense, where she was just thrust into it as a child.
Well, she has to be a warrior, and she gets really good at it, and I don't think she necessarily...
Very good at it.
I don't think she enjoyed it most of the time.
Like,
I think there are moments we see her doing that, right?
I can't remember who was it who said to who, but she's just like, I think Major Kira wants to kill me. She's just like, no, she doesn't want to kill you. How do you know? It's just like, if she wanted you dead, you would be.
You'd just be dead.
You would be dead. But she has a kind of a great warrior arc in a way where she, has to help freedom fighters of the former oppressors of her world.
Well, and when we first meet her, I think the first time we encounter Major Kira Nerys in what becomes Ben Sisko's office, she's having it out with the pretty much brand new provisional government as someone who was a freedom fighter months or maybe a year ago. Like that recently.
Yeah.
So she's just become sort of legitimized into some brand new military.
Under another overseer.
Which she's not happy about.
No.
And her whole trajectory in some way looks like it's to get away from that, but in fact it's like to integrate that, and then right at the end of the war she's thrust into this position where they say, no, you're just going to have to pull all of that out of you again and go right back to it with your oppressors.
I thought I'd bring her in lower on my list just because of her unwilling nature. She's like not a warrior in her heart. She's just really, really good at it.
Well, I mean, I would argue that I think she finds it in there.
Yes,
but
yes.
she would not necesserly have ever
doesn't embrace it.
She wouldn't have gone looking for it if she didn't have to find
yes,
it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
In that sense, she's not. She's no Klingon going, rah, let's get to it, right? She's very professional, and she'll do her job every time.
Any crossover there?
She was number 3 on my list.
Very good.
Maybe
very
why
good.
I'm waxing a little eloquent here.
Yeah, so no, that's how I think we can go kind of about this structurally here. I think it'll work.
Yeah.
Shall I go to my next one here?
Do it. This is a fun way to go through a list.
To know your enemy, you must become your enemy. Or in other words, sometimes you have to become the villain.
Now that
Bit of a giveaway?
is a Ben Sisko. For a moment, I thought you were speaking about Locutors of Borg. It'd be a really interesting choice there as a great warrior.
Mm.
You know, one battle takes out 40 Federation ships and gets rid of 11,000 of their personnel. Like, that's a pretty big feat. But you are referring to the bombing and rendering uninhabitable of, I think it's Quatal Prime and a couple of other worlds.
He became
He became the
Javert.
villain. He did. He let Eddington have what he wanted. That's a great moment.
Dax likes cheering for the bad guy. But also a great warrior. He basically ended up leading the war effort in the most important, dangerous war the Federation had ever seen.
Retook Deep Space Nine.
Retook Deep
Not
Space
one, but I
Nine.
think 2 at different occasions. Briefly left and then was driven away later and came back. Maybe it's just the once. Anyway.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, just a great warrior. A really, really good battlefield commander.
I mean, showed great field tactics and ability in, AR-558.
Yeah. Yeah, so in a number of kinds of sort of theaters, he was able to demonstrate an ability to command, but also an ability to fight and survive, single-handed and in a group, against Jem'Hadar, Cardassians, Klingons, Romulans,
Q.
Yeah, I think the only Starfleet officer I know of that ever decked Q.
Hurt his feelings.
Oh, man. Yeah. Oh, what a lovely choice.
Not on your list?
Not on my list.
Okay. All warfare is based on deception. Let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night, and when you move, fall like a thunderbolt. Supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Be extremely subtle, even to the point of formlessness. Be extremely mysterious, even to the point of soundlessness. Thereby, you can be the director of the opponent's fate.
Benjamin, do you know how many of us there are here right now? Just 4. That's my guess.
The founders?
Yep. Or
Elon Garrick.
Founders are Garrick.
It was Garrick, yeah.
Yeah. At first I thought it was an Abertane, and I thought Garrick, and then you said formlessness.
Like, I wasn't
'Cause
thinking...
the moment where they
Yeah.
spring their trap on Tane is...
I actually think
crazy
Garrick's
moment.
better at his job than in Auburn Tane. And a better warrior because, in a sense, a warrior has to have some sort of justness, it would seem. And Auburn Tane was more of a straight-up cutthroat spy.
Yeah, he was kind of a regime change operator.
Didn't have the character growth Garrick did.
Garrick has a really interesting degree of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those traits, I think, that made him a good spy, because he could empathize with whoever he was spying on, working to assassinate, whatever it was, without that really troubling him too much. Yeah, he's a fascinating study in compartmentalization and sort of he's one of those people who I think would be a kind of peak of Cardassian mentalism.
Yeah.
For which they're already admittedly famous.
I assume he's not on your list.
No.
And I wasn't thinking about him
No.
as a warrior either.
But it's a really interesting choice.
I kept reading quotes from The Art of War, and I found a lot of them that kept just making me think Garrick. I'm like, wow, Garrick in his own way is like doing that subtle art of war.
Sun Tzu's whole approach to warfare, particularly because he's coming out of, I think, what is called that Warring States period in China, where everybody's just sort of piling on everybody else. Yeah, his way of trying to cut through all of those thorny messes were these kinds of considerations, and applying them to battlefield combat, coming out of the kind of focused ritual techniques, I think, in which he was trained in Corps, that sort of thing. Yeah, I think you're right. He has this sense of like, what you really want to be is like a stone dropped into a pond, and it's going to drop to the bottom of that pond. Things may deter it or push it or pull it, but it knows exactly where it's going, and there's nothing that's actually going to finally stop it,
Yeah.
except its own goal.
And some of the moments that made me relate to those quotes was, I find all this hand-to-hand combat most distasteful. But he's willing to fight the Klingons, but like on his terms, you know what I mean? He doesn't want to just like fight with bat'leths and stuff.
Yeah, it's true.
You'd shoot a man in the back, Garrick. It's the safest way. He's still.
And again, he's completely untroubled by what anyone. He's like, that's obvious. If you're going to shoot somebody,
of course.
Why would you
want to
let them
just
see you
be
before you
like,
do that?
"Hi, I'm going to shoot you"?
exactly.
Doesn't do him any good, does it?
Certainly doesn't do me any good.
No, it doesn't do either of us any good. But also the fact that he ends up fighting the resistance on Cardassia and becomes one of the key instruments and leaders of that resistance.
Yeah. His madness on Empok North is, I think, one of my favorite.
And that's another thing. That's kind of like a warrior's call out. He kind of wants to meet Chief, who he sees as a warrior.
The hero of Setlik 3, absolutely.
Treat your men as you would your own beloved sons, and they will follow you into the deepest valley. My next one is Miles O'Brien, the hero of Setlik 3. The reason I elevate him above some others is not just because he, went one-on-one with Garrick, so I put him above Garrick. Nothing like that, really, so much. The scene that makes me put him above the others is when he meets Boone, who ended up being a Cardassian.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, I haven't seen you since Setlik. And he's just like, yeah, that's why I got out, Boone says. And Miles is like, that's why I stayed in. That takes a warrior to face the most horrible thing you've ever seen. Become the hero of that scene. But we've seen in later episodes how it's scarred him.
Yeah.
And how he hated himself and what he had become. And
absolutely. There's that
still
great
chooses,
conversation with the Cardassian in 10 Forward.
But still makes that the moment that makes him choose what to do with the rest of his life. You know what I mean? He makes that's a warrior's move.
He could easily have said, you know what, I've done my bit, I think. Like, my tour's done, I'm going to go do something different, right?
Yeah.
And it would have been a perfectly fair decision. But yeah, he chooses in that moment to sort of, I see what you mean, sort of be a warrior.
Incredibly good at war, the hero of Setlik 3.
Yeah.
They declare him an expert in battlefield tactics and combat in that Klingon court scene.
Oh, yeah, exactly, Yeah, they do.
Because he's, been decorated several times, been in over 200 engagements, Yeah. He's like, I don't know, 100, 150. He's like, Chief O'Brien has been in like 245 engaged, like 100 more than Chief thought he was in. He's lost count. And as far as that quote goes, it's just, most people would follow Chief into hell, I would think. It's the way he leads his engineering crew and everything. Like, they all just love him.
Sure.
He doesn't put himself above anyone or anything. He's just
he's going to ask a lot of you, but he's going to do it right beside you. Absolutely. And you see that kind of inspirational quality singled out in a number of real-world historical conflicts. For instance, there's this historical, often thought to be apocryphal, but I don't think it is, sort of tale about British officers in World War I, that they never ran and they never ducked. Partly because the whole point was to literally kind of hold themselves above the fray in a certain sense. And, when the men saw them take out their Webley and head for the side of the trench, they knew they were going pretty much over first, their lieutenant or whoever it was going to be, right? And those were people that they would follow time and time again. Also tend to have a very high casualty rate, those sort of frontline commanders in that sense, or officers.
Well, O'Brien must suffer.
Well, and exactly, and you see this in O'Brien and many officers in this case who push themselves beyond where they would if it was just them, for the sake of those under their command.
And
and they sacrifice themselves often.
When he gets into it with Worf, because Worf is like, he's going to die. You just tell him he's going to die. And Chief is like, he's not going to die. You don't give up on him. Nobody gives up on him, because it's the only chance he has. Yeah. Miles O'Brien.
Right on.
Okay, I guess I have 2 left here.
This brings your list to
my number
7.
My number 2.
6, maybe?
No, this will be my 5th one that I've said, and I'll have one more.
Okay.
So this is number 2. Know yourself, and you will win all battles. Actually, this one's cheating, because this one's 2 characters. But anyway. Victorious warriors, win first, and then go to war. while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. If you wait by the river long enough, the bodies of your enemies will float by.
Well, I think one of those is Worf.
Yeah.
Um,
The river's half the clue.
yeah. Well, in
river
one
to
sense,
get the Stovel core.
yeah. I might even say, well, you could put Jadzia.
No, I didn't. Well, I did think
Oh.
of Jadzia, but I didn't put her there. I mean, she is a great warrior, but I didn't.
Oh
think
well,
quite
you
on the
know,
level of
Kang
this.
is a great word. Is it?
To me, it was more for
No,
Martok.
Martok. I got the wrong guy, not Kang.
When I was thinking of great warrior
Battle
arcs,
Master.
other than who I put as my number one,
Yeah.
these two were the best I could think of.
And Martok comes from a real low place when we first meet him.
And Worf does too, as like an outcast from the society in general.
Yeah.
And they both have their own crazy warrior arc, where Martok's is, as you said, started a low position.
Well, and we
his
also
way
find
up.
him at a very low point in his life too, right? He's
Yeah,
kind of
he
given
has-
up on himself.
Well, yeah, after he had become what he had wanted, and then he got thrown into that Jem'Hadar prison and had it all stripped away from him.
Exactly, right?
And then he rises above that and becomes a leader of the Klingons in the effort yet again, and then has leadership thrust upon him.
Yeah, by a guy he gives a chance to, you know, and he, I think, alone of all Klingons we ever meet, gives Worf a chance, just person to person. Even Kern doesn't do that with Worf. First off,
No.
Kern challenges. Kern just butters him one side and the other until he drives him crazy. Every Klingon treats him like he's got something to prove. And Martok showed up at Worf's quarters to ask him, "Why did you take my boy's knife?" You know.
That wasn't Martok.
Oh, sorry, that's not Martok.
That was a changeling.
Oh, that's right. That's true. Well, pretending to be Martok, and he
Yeah.
does a very good impersonation.
It's true.
That's how Martok would have behaved later, anyway. But you're
Mhm.
right.
Because in the prison, he's just like, "Oh, I've heard of you. If you're Worf, then you must be Garrick." You know.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I wonder what he heard of him.
Oh
But
well,
yeah.
he's quite known in the Empire. I mean, he's
I suppose he did
challenged
kill
the High
Duras,
Council. He like
Yeah,
killed Duras. He's the one Klingon in Starfleet.
yeah. Apart from the comics.
Apart from the comics,
Konam.
Konam.
Yeah.
We'll talk about Konam some other.
We were excited about a deep cut moment there.
Yeah, we were.
Anyway,
And with Worf, another great outsider,
Mhm.
could have become the leader of his people. But again, in that kind of, he's the great noble warrior in a sense. Where any other Klingon would have took that. Except for maybe Martok. He didn't want it either. Like, those two
didn't.
were the best two to rise to the top of that.
yeah. But in that sense, I mean, Worf almost sits in a kind of, to me, he's almost a symbolic Kahless in that moment. You know, he's like Kahless bestowing the mantle on Mart, and
So those two, I felt they have the kind of the
Right on.
traditional kind of warrior arcs.
sure.
And Worf wants to live the warrior's life, so does Martok. They're the willing warriors. And
Yep.
they do a good job of it.
They understand that they're cleaving closer in their own way to what Sun Tzu would talk about as being a warrior than what many Klingons would practice in their midst.
Yeah, I thought so. So if it weren't for the great warrior, are either of those on your list?
Worf, of course, is on my
Worf, of
list.
course, yes.
I had thought about putting Martok on my list, but then I thought, well, I'll just put Worf and I'll mention Martok because he's, of the House of Martok.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the greatest warrior in Star Trek history, I think, is obvious when you really think about it. So, let's see what Sun Tzu says.
All right.
In the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity. Opportunities multiply when they are seized. The greatest victory is that which requires no battle. Who wishes to fight must first count the cost.
I suspect perhaps a reference to your 2 semesters on Ferenginar here.
Well, I don't know if that counts as a bias, but let's just say I've gained some insight
Yeah.
into what it is to be a true warrior.
I'm kind of tempted. I'm tempted to say Rom.
This is
But
not wrong.
it's not like because like I can see why you would say it because Rom he ends up being Grand Nagus, right?
Yeah.
Like, without firing a shot, without even really knowing he was going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But he never intended upon it.
Can you imagine?
I could see saying that of Moogie as well.
Oh yes. No, great warrior for her people and
Well, I mean,
justice.
she's and her whole people, right? She's like, we're going to increase our productivity by more than 2 people.
Good shout out. I didn't think of Moogie, but she deserves a shout out for sure. Because definitely fierce. And you may say
Might say
that
Captain.
it was passed on
Yeah.
to the greatest warrior in Star Trek history. Can you imagine, Dave, a Ferengi, a business-minded sort, a gregarious people person, who could also become head of a Klingon house?
Of course.
Can you
House of
imagine
Quark.
such a feat? Like
The House of Quark!
the House of Quark, the greatest warrior.
No.
Not only does he seize opportunity, he does it at the front lines.
It's true. That's true. Fights in that battle of AR 5580.
But he doesn't succumb to the worst of his society. He rises above it, and he seizes opportunity where he sees it, and again
Nice.
became the head of a Klingon house.
That's true. That's true. That's a fun choice.
He gained the attention of a female Klingon's heart.
That's true. Even fought ritual combat with a batman.
He saved Moogie from a Jem'Hadar.
That's true.
His strike force he put together himself. Unwilling warrior, perhaps, but perhaps the most resourceful warrior on this entire list.
I love it.
That's my list, Dave.
I love it. Well, let me throw out a few names that didn't make your list.
Sure.
And I'll tell you why.
Let's get your
they're on
order
mine.
here.
My number 5
Mhm.
actually was Khan.
A
Partially because
great
Khan's,
warrior. Mm-hmm.
Khan's war or Khan's struggle stretches over ages of Federation history.
The
You know?
Eugenics War.
It starts in the Eugenics Wars, which is the 1990s,
1996
early
or something like that.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. After which he conquers about half of Earth, I think, at one point, or is in charge of it, and eventually is forced onto an old DY-100. Well, now it's old, then it was new, and shot off into space in cryosleep with a bunch of his people.
I wonder if that was the beginning, because I believe he took over a lot of like the eastern part
Yes.
of the world, Asia, probably India, Africa, perhaps.
Maybe that's the beginning of the Eastern Alliance, eh?
Yeah, the Eastern Coalition.
Could be. I always wonder. I didn't know if they were an Eastern,
Different wars.
like whether they were an Eastern United States coalition, like from.
And I believe they had him
like
like
the East Coast,
confined to
you know.
Australia at some point. Like I believe the
did they?
last of his movement kind of, and then they took off from on the
Right.
Botany Bay.
Right. Oh, which makes sense. Yeah. Where's the name of their craft was,
Yeah.
right? And of course, then wakes up in Kirk's time, and then we have the Wrath of Khan. A
Good
great
pick.
warrior,
Good pick.
great warrior, and really choosing to be one in each moment. He
Yeah.
has that ethos in his heart. We know that his aggression was, amplified
Mhm.
in his makeup, but he
As
owns
well as
that.
some other not so good traits.
Absolutely. My number 4.
Mm-hmm.
This is a warrior that I would call neither willing nor unwilling. She's an interesting case. Is Captain Data.
Captain Data
I
of
believe
the
USS
Sutherland.
who
Cap-
single-handedly
Good pick.
figures out the Romulan plan and therefore forestalls the Duras takeover of the Klingon Empire.
And disobeys Picard.
Indeed, or it certainly
At least-
dawdles in obeying
Yeah,
Picard quite
getting there.
considerably.
One more Mr. Data, and it was probably going to get real.
Precisely, right? And then after that for me was Kira, after that was Worf.
Mm-hmm.
But my number 1 warrior of all time.
Quark. No. Really? No. Okay, I'm open
Is
to
unnamed character
unnamed character.
who I've referenced already in this podcast. Romulan Commander.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah,
Romulan Commander.
Played by Mark Leonard.
Leonard.
in the classic TOS episode Balance of Terror. Maybe
Wow.
one of my favorite single episodes of Star Trek.
Dave loves a deep cut.
Gosh, I love that one.
That is a great episode.
He's world weary. He reminds me of some of the scenes in the Iliad where Hector is dandling his little son in the air, sort of holding it, and knowing he's headed back out beyond those walls. Any one of those trips could be to his death. but that now here he can at least hold on to the way he squares himself with doing that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Romulan commander has a depth and a nuance that makes him both a consummate professional and a man who deeply desires peace, even knowing that that's not ever his lot in life.
No.
Yeah, it's just a beautiful
Certainly at that point.
portrayal. Yeah.
Star
wasn't
Trek
gonna happen.
canon, no.
No. Yeah, those were the
Good list, Dave.
books on my list. Thank you. Thank you.
So, Dave, where were you in 1996? Where were you fighting?
Where was I fighting in 1996? Well,
During the eugenics war, of course.
yeah. My front was mainly on the pond in the backyard of my house. But no, that was one of those things in Star Trek that struck me really powerfully the first time I saw it, because it was in about 98 or 2000, I think I first saw that episode. Just in the sort of way reruns were working at the time. There used to be these things, folks, called reruns. No, anyway.
Tell me about them. No, we don't have time for that.
Open the archives and tell us a story. But anyway, so I caught it on reruns, and this was, I think it was the Space Seed, the first time we ever meet Khan. They're talking about the eugenics wars. They're talking about the whole troubled history of Earth prior to first contact. And they make a point there of distinguishing that eugenics wars were different than World War III. So they really make a pointed effort in that episode, to my mind, to show that the current political instabilities of 1968, 69, 70 had exacerbated themselves along with a steeply accelerating technological knowledge, which I think when you look at the era they're in is things like nitinol and all sorts of stuff were getting discovered that were just materials with magical properties almost, all kinds of stuff, right? This was a really open, hopeful moment in some ways, I think, at least from an American perspective. And that was coupled with, and facets, I'm sure, to the history. But the two that I'm pulling out are this sort of hope and then the fear of annihilation, which is ever present in a certain sense in Star Trek, from whale probes to V'gers to huge, all sorts of stuff, right? That's that sort of Cold War reality is part of that present as well. And I think that's what the original series in Space Seed projects out. You know, if we really do continue this technological race and this frightening militaristic race,
1996,
right, we're going to produce something we just cannot handle.
And the repercussions of that in Star Trek going forward, augments aren't allowed in Starfleet.
Right, they go out to the 24th century at least.
Yeah, Julian Bashir not allowed in Starfleet. And of course in Enterprise, the augments three-parter. Yes,
so really a very exciting set of episodes. A great way for Brent Spiner to make a reappearance. That was delightful.
I like that character.
He was really delicious as a villain.
Eric, was it? Erickson?
I think so, yeah. Now, the other thing that comes out of that episode is this point about World War III, which happened later, apparently. And we get more pieces of that story over time. We get a few hints about it in Enterprise, but the people in Enterprise at that point are so deliberately forward and outward looking that we don't tend to have more than asides about Earth history, apart from, that dip into a really bizarre World War II, But in First Contact and in the third season DS9 episodes, Past Tense Part 1 and 2, we get two views of the 21st century that show us the highly militarized position of Earth at the time. Right?
Well, that was going to be my next question. Where will you be fighting in 2026? Because I got your back, bro.
Good.
Batleth.
This may remain a pertinent
hand.
question.
A sharp one, like Mariners.
Oh, yeah. Well, I will hope that I am not near where any of the nuclear bombs happens a couple of times. There's a limited nuclear exchange as far as during that conflict, and that are sort of punctuated and spread out over a long time.
Is it 300 million that die in this war?
600 million.
600 million.
This is the war which is famously depicted, of course, as well in Encounter at Farpoint, where we see the heavily armored, narcotically anesthetized or narcotically sort of pacified soldiers. Not pacified, I suppose, really just subservient. Subservient.
No, what we know for sure is Picard and Data are not part of the Eastern Coalition.
We do know that. We don't know exactly what the heck the Eastern Coalition is, although your point about Khan is a really interesting one.
Could be.
I had assumed Eastern Continental U.S., but only because I figured everything had collapsed to such a local space that it would
could be
closer geographically.
Sure.
But there's nothing to say that just because some of the nation states had fallen, that all of them are completely gone by 2063, right? It just, because there's certainly lots of technology around and people are able to build stuff and get it going. They can build a warp drive, for heaven's sake. But what seems to have happened by then is a destruction of the architecture of nation states as a functional reality in people's lives. People still live sort of in Canada or in France or in the United States, but those had ceased to be large political realities for people. It seems like stuff had become very local, a lot of renewable energy, or maybe fusion power, which they seem to be working with as well, even when the Phoenix takes off. But certainly Cochrane has a consciousness that this is a nadir for humans, and that they need to, like the Phoenix, rise from these ashes and actually do something new.
Not sober.
That's a crazy suggestion in that bucket. Nobody flies that sober.
Lily, she's a badass.
Well, she might, yeah. But I will look back.
As I discussed in a previous episode, I love Lily.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Well, past tense to me is one of those moments that also strikes me as hopefully not prescient, but having resonances with the present day that are ringing louder all the time.
It was very effective in just creating that tension. Like, you
Absolutely.
feel the societal tension. And from two angles, too, not just in the zones or whatever they called them.
Yeah, you can
when,
see where Jadzia is that.
Yeah, with the rich party and stuff, and they're all nervous about things and but
they
also very unaware and ignorant of certain things as well.
Yeah, it's a brilliant depiction of a society really in a state of sort of bifurcated decay.
It's certainly not unbelievable as 2 years before.
Yeah, indeed.
A catastrophic world war.
Yeah, precisely. And those riots that begin there in the San Francisco Sanctuary District, which frankly, where they land and where they're trying to beam to in San Francisco, they would have been, I think, maybe a kilometer or two from Data's head.
Oh, well, that would have been helpful.
See? Go find Commander Data's head.
Right.
It'd be great. But
Geez, there's probably a few time travel episodes of Star Trek where they could have found Data's head. Director's cuts.
New on the Starfleet scavenger hunt. 1, find Data's head.
I think we could probably skip over the biggest war we see in Star Trek for now and leave it for the end, which is the Dominion War.
Sure, okay.
How about the Xindi War?
The Xindi War. Oh, yeah. That's a really interesting war because
Is
it's
it a
essentially
war?
a proxy war.
Yeah.
This other dimensional species who want to make a space for themselves in the Expanse, or it's not the Expanse, what's it called?
The Expanse.
The Delphic Expanse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have been over, I think, centuries now, distorting the gravitational, or exacerbating the gravitational anomalies in the area to the point that is going to make it possible for them to extrude their reality into ours. But for whatever reason, they see humans in particular as a threat. And so seek immediately to destroy Earth. I think partly to forestall the creation of the Federation, but partly just because they understand what happens when humans come anywhere near other people.
Yeah.
in possession of high technology. You know,
You will be assimilated.
sort of root beer and transporters. No, we have holodecks and out of saddle.
Yeah, not really a war. Definitely not a hot war, not a cold war. Just
It's certainly a set of, I think,
a
you
huge
could call it-
attack.
Yeah, and you could, and at that point, you could then say a kind
A declaration of war in that sense, I suppose.
Yeah, but the response that comes because Earth has precisely one spaceships at their disposal that can do this sort of thing. They have to send. Well, they're sort of saying, "All right, we're all in on this," but it also amounts essentially to a recon mission.
Yeah, the Zindi War, I guess, is a case in how to avoid a war.
Yeah,
Good
yeah,
job, Archer.
Yeah.
Doesn't get enough credit.
There's some soldiering and some warfare going on in there,
Yep.
but they don't actually get to war.
Yeah, he taps into his inner Cisco, or I suppose Cisco taps into his inner Archer, maybe? I don't know.
As in a case of sort of symbolism or who would be the archetype for whom, I think it might run that way. Although the prophets know no sequence.
What is this?
You hit the ball. So, where to from there?
Well, how about there's the TOS, there's A Taste of Armageddon,
Oh, now that's a really interesting.
where you have to
piece of
volunteer to be a victim, essentially.
Yeah, these are
Well,
two
it's
planets
not
who have been at
volunteer.
war for 500 years, I think.
Yeah, and it became inconvenient. And it was setting both of their societies back, so they decided, why don't we continue the war? But, we'll just...
Neither side was willing to end hostilities.
No.
But they weren't.
They didn't want
getting
their buildings...
anywhere.
They
And
didn't
they're-
want their
exactly.
buildings...
It seems like they just
destroyed
reduced their worlds
and-
to shambles, essentially, or it's got to a point where it was sort of two buildings and an angry house cat left, and thought we should really figure out a different way to do this.
Yeah, so they just came up with some calculations. I don't know if they did that together, or maybe they have a science council or a math council.
Yeah, apparently they learned to cooperate enough to figure out the rate at which they could acceptably kill each other.
Yeah. So Kirk's down on the planet in the away team, and they're like, "Oh my God, there's been an attack in the city that Kirk is in." He's just like, "Well, I don't feel it.
There
What?
appears to be no
What
attack.
kind of attack? I don't feel anything." He's like, "Enterprise, was there an attack?" They're like, "No, sir. It's all quiet." "No, sir. It's all quiet." It was Scotty up there.
But no, it's been a simulated attack
Yeah.
in a simulated computer modeled war.
And I think it kills 3 million people in the city or something. It's a bad
it's
attack.
a huge number of people. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, just an unspeakable number of people. And
And the guy who Kirk's talking to says he lost his wife in the previous attack.
Yeah. And they dutifully wander off to the disintegration stations and are promptly vaporized.
Yep. And yeah, exactly. If you're in that area, they're like, "Oh no, that area was destroyed."
Yeah, go get vaporized.
Cody fingers.
And there, I think essentially premised on the fact that Kirk refuses to sacrifice his crew or the Enterprise, for that matter, who they also end up deciding to hit in a simulated attack
Oh, true, because the Enterprise crew is expected to.
report to
To
be
disintegration.
To be disintegrated. They end up wrecking this whole setup.
Yeah. They blow up Disintegration Unit 12.
Indeed, one of Kirk's many considered violations of the Prime Directive, among his other many unconsidered violations of the Prime Directive.
I'd throw a fork into Disintegration Unit 12 if they were putting me in there.
I mean, I
assume a fork
can't
short
see
circuits
how
the
I
thing.
wouldn't do it as well. Honestly, I don't think I could. I could not submit myself to vaporizing.
No, I would question the equation. I'd be like, let me see these numbers. I'm not a mathematician, but I'm going to have to go over these numbers here.
Yeah, I think I might also. I think my tack would be to take them to court and produce the argument from Hobbes' Leviathan about the fact that the condemned person, even in a situation where they practice otherwise perfect obedience to their government, has every right and probably should try to escape if they're to be executed, because their own most essential commitment at that point, everything else having been lost, must be at least to their own survival. Which, in this case, I think, because there's no other higher moral imperative, seems reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
As an objection, at least, right, to be voiced, even if they wouldn't act on it. And then we'll go with the Borg thing, I guess.
So another one of those strange arguments where, in their mind, the people were going to die anyway.
Mm-hmm.
This way, we still have our buildings and our society can continue.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And I wonder if it isn't
our
a
kids,
kind of
if they
a,
weren't disintegrated, can still go to school because the school's still there. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder
Kirk's
if,
just like,
it's not a kind of a
But the problem with that is
meditation on like the problem of using large scale like statistical and data analysis in terms of casualty projections and that kind of stuff when they're
could be.
Famously, that was problematic for officers in the First World War who would get casualty projections, and then the situation would just go sideways. Like, say, the 1st of July 1916, the opening of the Battle of the Somme, where I think in one day the British Empire loses 58,000 casualties. Not all of them dead, but none of them in combat shape, right? But huge, tens of thousands of dead, nonetheless. And that kind of a debacle ends up, on average, shortening the lifespan of, as we were saying, the sort of frontline officers and even some of the rear officers as well, who had been giving those orders because they'd been working with a certain set of projections, sent them in. It was far exceeded than they thought, and psychologically, it was extraordinarily difficult on them from the position of being the person who gives the orders, from the people in the trenches, from the perspective of having to do it and survive or not, and the other line officers and that sort of thing. But there is this statistical reality where of the people that survive after a lot of those who are at officer rank tended to have shorter lifespan. And it was suspected that might have been because of the psychological weight of doing that again and again and again, you know?
Seems to me that
which is pretty awful.
Yeah. Seems to me the problem with that society and their defense of it is this detached method of warfare and even the death associated with it.
Right.
Removes the imperative somewhat to end the conflict. It's not in their face as much. It's not in their daily lives as much.
It
Their
becomes a kind of
buildings aren't
managed.
falling down.
Yeah, or sustainable
they're not
war.
going to force themselves to end the conflict as readily.
Yeah.
I don't think Kirk brought that point up, but to me that seems to be the biggest problem with their society as they've constructed it there.
Yeah, and certainly a point of logic you could bring up against it. Absolutely.
How about next we discuss one of my favorite episodes that discusses some war issues, The Wounded.
Beautiful episode.
Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yeah. In some ways, a quiet episode, or subdued episode in some respects, but a very powerful episode for all of its quietness.
But tense.
Absolutely.
Because, Maxwell is killing civilians and on his way to do it again, and they can't get to him in time.
Yeah.
Or at least can't talk him down. Just board the ship, Picard.
Yeah. And Picard and, no, I forget Mark Alimo's character's name in that.
Masset.
That's Gulmasset, that's right. I always want Gulmasset to be Gulmadred, but this is Gulmasset.
Masset.
Great. Great goals.
Good goals, yep. Good gully.
Miss Mullet. Anyway, yeah, I mean, we see them trying to find ways to trust each other while retaining the ability to try and outflank each other at the same time. And you see that sort of the sense of the kind of realpolitik moving between the Federation and the Cardassian Union at this sort of last moment of the Cardassian border wars, right? Because the peace has been achieved not long ago.
Yeah, the war is technically over.
Yeah, hostilities
but not for Maxwell.
And not for
As
Maxwell.
Picard
right?
says he's someone who couldn't find himself a place in the peace. Lost his family.
Yeah.
And for the war to just end with, the sign of a paper or something.
Yeah.
Seemed to disrespect or delegitimize the death of his family,
Yeah, and it asks questions for me about what is behind that in terms of Federation society as a setting, but it stands as a great commentary on the way in which the mental health of military personnel, especially military personnel returning from tours of duty, is often a woefully neglected priority. In contemporary society, it's gotten a teeny bit better in recent years, but still generally abysmal. Now, if the Federation's learned from that, or that may be a blind spot for them too,
Where was the council on
well,
Maxwell's
see,
ship?
that's what I wonder, right? Maxwell, after all of this, when
None of them
the
could
war
tell.
ends, he's going to go get debriefed. He's still got this is the Phoenix. No, the Pegasus. What's it called?
No, that's not
USS
the Pegasus.
Phoenix. No, it's USS
Yeah, it's the
Phoenix.
Yeah.
But how
There has to be a
could-
counselor on that ship.
How could Starfleet let this guy
That's the first question Picard
continue to
has.
serve?
He says, Chief, how did he take the deaths of his family?
Yeah.
Chief's just like, oh, well, didn't miss a day's work.
Yeah, and that to me, as a guy who works as a counselor, is the moment where I would say no. Like
Take a day.
I would be pleading with the ship's doctor, who's the only person who really could remove the captain from command.
Another perhaps failure of duty on the Phoenix.
I wonder, but they all loved him, right? And there's the
Yeah.
dynamic, right? His
Maybe they did know, yeah.
his crew love him. They may know he's hurting, but they say, we can support him through this. But
And the Chief tried to.
exactly the depths of his grief and pain, I wonder if you're just as you say, they're exacerbated by the way the war ends, but I think they're also exacerbated by his recent posting, which is right back in the Calandra sector. I think they're in the Calandra sector.
Yeah, that
right?
wasn't a great idea.
He's right on the Cardassian border again. To me, if
Now, he
I
may
were,
have asked to be.
and there's a failure at the level of Starfleet Command.
True. That should be a red flag. Why would you want to be on the Calandra sector?
Exactly, right? You'd think, no, we're gonna send you out.
Oh, I think they're running guns.
We're gonna send you out to talk to the children of Tamar.
Yeah.
just go bang your head on that brick wall for a while, or just guard the border against the Gorn or something. But don't go back to the Cardassians for a while,
No.
maybe ever.
Yeah.
And that is there's a real powerful evocation of the systemic failures of caring for veterans and returned soldiers.
Chief's commander at Setlik.
Yep, Chief's Commander at Setlik.
Poor Stompy.
Oh, good lad.
Good lad, yeah.
Good.
Cool under fire as a mountain lake.
That's true. Oh, and we see beautiful moments of camaraderie like that throughout the episode. From the conversation about Stompy to even the odd camaraderie of O'Brien speaking with his Cardassian opposite number. In 10 Forward, where he at first angrily rejects this guy's attempt to have some kind of association with him. He then sort of sidles up to him and says, what I'm really hating here is myself and the things that I became.
Because of you, he said.
Yeah, because of you. Yeah. Because I went and fought you. Not that he thinks that's wrong, but it's exactly right. I couldn't do anything else, and look what happened.
The Cardassian's like, to be honest, I'd rather be back on my own ship. Chief's like, good point. You can probably see that point of view. I wouldn't want to be on
this
a Cardassian
is
ship
not a comfortable
right
position
now.
for you either.
No.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful episode, and brings up again that piece of heritage, right?
Minstrel boy.
Yeah, but this is also, I think, the episode after Keiko and Miles are married, or very shortly after they're married, one or two episodes later. Because we see a lot of them in that season.
Yeah.
And that's when O'Brien decides to feed Keiko his mother's dish, and tells her that
Corned beef and cabbage.
she would prepare the food with her hands, and Keiko is just
Or is it shepherd's pie?
sort of stunned, or something, a stew or something kind
She's
of
like,
like.
what are these little dark things?
Oh yeah, capers. Those are
Capers,
capers,
yeah.
yeah. But yeah, that she thought that unreplicated food was healthier.
Yeah, that's the Honey, I'm Not a Fish episode.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Honey, I'm not a fish.
But you see those very homely moments in it as well, or homey moments, as well as these moments of woundedness and
Yeah, he's like, honey,
Come on.
I could tell when I was in 10-4 that there are some people that still don't like the Cardassians. He's talking about himself, of course. She's like, well, how do you feel about
Projection,
them? He's just
right?
like, oh, I don't feel one way about them at all. Like, again, like Maxwell,
Yeah.
They're both just like, no, I don't feel anything about it.
Yeah.
Nothing at all. We're good here.
And that kind of resistance, what's called projection and resistance, right, are classic both deflections, but they're also classic defenses against our awareness of ourselves in situations that would conflict with our core values. And that deep-seated loathing that Miles experiences, I think, does conflict with his Starfleet values considerably, and enough that it makes him hate the man he's become because of it. And of course, we also get the beautiful
The Picard speech.
yes,
That we will not dismiss him.
yeah,
That one.
beautiful.
It is.
This is also we'll be watching.
Yeah, also we'll be watching.
He was right, probably about his claims about the facts, not about what he did about them.
It's like you weren't taking food and science things with your jamming censorship here.
Yeah,
They couldn't scan it or whatever.
that's a lot of trouble to go to for food that you are going to bring anyway.
In the Calander sector, which is like very strategic.
Yeah, exactly. You can hit any one of 3 or 4 Federation or Federation adjacent systems from there, right?
Yeah, we will not dismiss him. Because he did have a distinguished, heroic career.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And in many ways, he could be seen as, in some sense, just as
A
Stumpy
casualty.
could, as a casualty, but also he could be seen as that minstrel boy in the song.
See, that's the thing with the minstrel boy. I see him as the minstrel boy. Obviously, Stompy's the minstrel boy. Because Stompy's the
Miles,
minstrel
too.
boy because the minstrel boy dies.
Yeah,
Stompy dies.
yeah,
Stompy, I think, is like they're obvious the minstrel boy
absolutely.
who they're
But
talking about.
they've all got
But
shards
Miles
of that.
as well.
Like
Miles
it's
was supposed to be
shrapnel
a
of the
cello
minstrel
player.
boy, right? Yeah,
Miles is the minstrel boy as well.
he wanted to be a cello, but something in him died.
Yeah.
Right? Something he doesn't pick that up anymore.
It's a beautiful analogy in that
You know,
episode,
and
because it
it's
works
a-
on so many levels for so many characters.
Yeah, it's a very powerful story.
Mm-hmm.
One sword at least I write shall guard. One faithful harp shall praise thee. That's really the premise on which Maxwell was working. That
Yeah.
one person at least is not gonna let the Cardassians start this thing again.
He knows. Nobody else was there. They don't get it,
And that's a hard, lonely place to be in.
And there's, of course, TNG, The Hunted.
Oh yeah,
There's some kind of Vietnam allegories, perhaps.
yeah. These are the. Is this the sort of super soldiers?
Yep. Who are treated sort of as criminals when they come back.
Yeah, there was a real turn. Yeah, exactly. In attitude about veterans returning from Vietnam in particular, that had not been experienced by, in anything like the same degree, if at all, for many, by returning Great War or Second World War or Korean War vets, for the most part. But the dynamics of commemoration that way become really problematic when the culture for whom you've gone to fight then subsequently rejects you, right? Like, what is the place of your legacy? What is the place of your memory? And for these characters, what is the place of your own life and habitation? It's just a prison moon world thing. So I don't think it's a specifically unpleasant world that they've been stuck. Like, they're not. It's not like they're put in a maximum security prison. I think they're just
No. They're just put away.
dumped somewhere else.
Yeah. Too dangerous.
Where they don't want to be, because they want to do their own things and have their own purposes, right?
They're experimented on
Yeah.
to complete the goal.
Yeah, it's an interesting episode, and he's an extraordinarily clever fellow.
Yeah.
It takes Data to outwit him. I love that move he makes with like
And Worf and Riker to take
jettisoning
them
parts
down.
of the ship and all that sort of stuff. That's a great cat and mouse game. to
Yeah.
play.
That's a good episode.
Yeah, yeah,
Definitely a commentary on the treatment of soldiers, but during war and after.
Sure. Sure. I mean, in one sense, if you looked at it from a different perspective, that guy could be kind of his own Steve McQueen in The Great Escape, right?
Sure.
Escaping from the thing despite impossible odds, right? There's all sorts of, if you sort of displace yourself into the perspectives of the different people, ways of coming at that.
Dave, can you fathom the nemesis?
I
Can you glimpse him?
I
If the Nemesis were here right now, he would kill you and stake you to the ground, upturned.
upturned.
So you see why we call the Nemesis a beast and not a man.
Yes,
These Cardassians, were they beasts?
beasts.
Voyager, Nemesis.
Brilliant episode again.
Do you fathom the Nemesis, Dave?
It's a great line though.
Upturned.
What abyss do you look into when you look into the eyes of the Nemesis? Basically, you're seeing a monster, and that dehumanization, we can say, or delegitimization of another sort of sentient on the basis that they're really monsters extends out absolutely from our own dehumanization of other human beings, right? And the ways that we'll often use names or propaganda in media, in discourse, in private life, in military sort of propaganda stuff about our enemies, independent of the age in which we live. We have bad words to call our enemies, and bad things to say about them often.
Ours being recording devices.
Well, yeah, that's true. The invective I spew at my computer is certainly not worth repeating on air.
I fathom the Nemesis.
I think I fathomed the Nemesis, and then it defeats me once again.
Oh yes, we haven't defeated the Nemesis.
It leaves me upturned. Oh man. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's an episode where there's themes of brainwashing and conscription.
Yeah.
But I also felt that I caught,
and also getting I guess it's conscription, but getting somebody else to fight your war for you.
Exactly. I was thinking about proxy wars, about the kinds of fomenting of factions that sometimes larger powers will do. You think even like with this was it the Circle on Deep Space Nine, where they're being sort of fomented by the Cardassians from outside, essentially as a kind of regime change operation, right? And we also have conscription here in the sense it sort of shades toward the notion of unwilling conscripts and lots of kinds of conscripts, but also the sort of child soldiers or even those who have been deeply propagandized to the point that they willingly take up arms against another group. And pick any one of N examples in our own world, and you'll find sufficient horror for your taste, I'm sure. But yeah, that notion of conscription is a really, really ugly one, particularly for Chakotay. Like the stripes that lays in his soul are pretty deep in the end.
It brings him back to how he was viewing Cardassians for sure.
Yep. And I felt that I saw a change in him as a character after that episode.
Yeah.
He becomes much more deliberately open-hearted, I find, after that episode. Like he's seen into the abyss of his own heart, and now he needs to find his empathy and his compassion all over again, almost, right? It's not that he didn't have them before, but it's like he's the landscape around him has changed inwardly, and he's got to find his way out again.
Yeah, when he first decided to help Janeway and become a first officer, he let go a huge part of who he became when he was in the Maquis. And then
he had to accept that
he
time
sort
was
of
done.
lets go of the rest of it, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because it never really leaves him, but he lets go of the sort of inward personal stance almost that he'd taken on in order to operate as a Maquis. Much like Kira took on a certain kind of inward stance to operate as a Bajoran resistance member that she can then lay aside for a time when she's operating as a major or a colonel or a commander in Starfleet. Even though that latter commission sort of brings back all the other stuff and drags it back out of the closet, but with a Starfleet badge on it. Now, there are other forms of conscription that or proxying your warfare. And
Assimilation?
Assimilation is an excellent one. And the revenge on assimilation in Borg. Hugh, the wonderful, deep Hugh.
To genocide or not to genocide?
Indeed. That is the question, right? And Picard deeply struggles with this.
Well, I'm here to tell you, Picard, you made the wrong one.
Yeah, that's Guinan's point.
That's Admiral Nechayev's point, wasn't it? Like, remember, they're mad at Picard because he didn't genocide.
Oh, they are, but I think Guinan is not too happy with him either.
Oh, yeah?
I'm pretty
That's
sure
true.
Guinan said,
Yeah,
just get rid of him. Just get rid of him.
Yeah, but she changes her mind when she talks to him.
It's true. Once she talks to
Yeah.
you, that's true. Yeah, she and Picard are really kind of in lockstep about him for a long time.
Yeah.
But isn't that the episode where they have the wonderful fencing scene?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where she starts to turn him around about
She's
you
just
a
like, you
little
felt sorry for me, too.
bit.
And got you poked.
Yeah. Oh, man, Guinan.
Yeah, but Guinan slips up some in her wisdom sometimes, too.
Yep. Guinan's an interesting warrior that way, too. Good swordsman. Good sword
True.
fighter.
I think we may find more about her in the upcoming season of Picard,
Yeah,
perhaps.
I hope so. That'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this would have been a very covert way to annihilate the Borg.
Yeah.
And we do see, oddly enough, that even though this kind of individuality is not introduced into the Borg, that there is a certain remnant of that persists in it anyways. We learn in
It
Voyager.
does, yeah. With Unimatrix Zero and...
Exactly. So it's possible that might not even... They might have just been like, okay, yep, we'll just store it over there. That's fine. Don't you worry about that, folks. That it may never have even been a problem. But ethically, that's never really the issue in that sense, right? I mean, if you can form the problem in your mind that way ethically to a sufficient clarity, then if there's a non-zero chance of that genocide occurring if you send this Borg back, then it's sort of theoretically the same as 100% chance. You're still in the same ethical neighborhood. You're just at one end of the street or the other, right?
Will this kill the Borg? Maybe? Or maybe? Maybe.
Will I lose my integrity and self-belief in the process? Yeah.
Will I become the villain?
Exactly, right?
Picard is not the kind of guy to become the villain because he was forced to become the villain, and he didn't much.
Yeah, I don't. He doesn't like. He doesn't mind with flirting at being the villain, but he will never really go to that place. It's true. The only ways he really gets there, like for instance, when in that moment of rage with the Tommy gun in First Contact, right? There are moments like that where he is overcome by what's been in his past.
When
But
he
you're right,
breaks his little ships.
yeah. I mean, one of my favorite, and this is one of the scenes that has stuck with me through all of Star Trek. One of my favorite scenes about warfare in all of Star Trek is Jake Sisko bailing on Julian Bashir and running away and
a
finding
couple
himself
shells
in a
fall and he's
foxhole
gone.
with a dying man.
Yeah. Which is not what he wanted to find in that foxhole.
Exactly. And it's not what he wanted to find in himself either, right?
No.
He got hit in a moment of panic and took off. And he was neither trained for that situation nor prepared for its enormity when it hit him. He was already traumatized for what was going on around him on that planet.
Yeah.
He was in the perfect condition to panic in that moment. But what he finds himself in is in the middle of Starfleet people panicking and running away.
And he had just seen how people view people who panic and run away
Exactly.
with the guy who shot himself in the foot.
Exactly. And, the thing that Jake is able to do with that, however, is turn it into, turn his failure in that moment, in his own understanding of it, I think, as much as any of theirs, he's able to turn that into an ability to connect to both the people who wouldn't run and the people who do run, or the people who didn't and the people who do, in their humanity, and just the sort of just the fact that it has its vagaries, and he ran. But yeah, that to me, like you're just not in control of those moments. There's no being in control. Like at the first Battle of Chintaka, they're not in control.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, great episode. Here,
Oh,
go
yeah.
ahead with the water. Probably just leak out of me anyway. Now, this guy is very much not like the people who fight the Nemesis, because he's just like, don't let me fall over. I don't want to die with my face in the dirt.
Exactly.
He wants to be upturned.
Yep. He wants to see the sky or something, right? Or at least maybe have his face be seen,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And that, man, that really makes me think. Years and years and years ago, I was in a set of tunnels about 80 feet underground in a place called O Sector, which is off to the side of the Vimy Ridge Canadian National Memorial, in a wooded section, which is not generally open to the public because there's so many unexploded munitions in the ground. Like, you could walk through there on the paths that are safe and just see something called a toffee apple, which is a big mortar with a round thing on the top that would have had chlorine gas in it. Just, it's been pushed up out of the ground that spring, and there it is. Hopefully it's popped so that you know there's no gas going to come out. Anyway, so I was doing some work with this group that was doing a sort of a dig there into the tunnel system that was used by the Canadians at the time. So we go down there and we're looking around in these tunnels, and they're dug into limestone. They're, say, 4 feet high, maybe. 90% humidity, about 10 degrees down there all the time. And so the soldiers would have come forward through about 2 kilometers of these tunnels to get to the front line, or just behind the front line, where in the morning mines would get blown to open out the very top of the tunnel at the enemy lines into their trenches. They would just pour through, or they would come up out of the trenches and then advance over the ground they were supposed to, right? Or the tunnel, sorry, into the trenches and go over the top from their own side. But what I found down there was a running stream.
Data's head.
No, but sort of like that. It was a running stream of pictures, names, serial numbers, locations. Some people would draw their regimental badge on the wall. Some people drew rude cartoons of Germans. Some people drew a flag or the Queen or whatever they could think of, because they were sitting down there in the dark, maybe with a little kerosene lantern or something, smoking like mad, drawing on the walls, because that might be the last mark they made in this world, you know? That, yeah, and that's true in battlefields in many cases, independent of where you find them or when they happen. There's markings like that. Now, moving forward, we have lots more war with the Borg, actually.
Lots more with the
Tons
Borg.
with the Borg. I mean, Voyager.
I mean, never
famously-
officially declared as a war.
No, but certainly fought like one.
Yeah. The Borg will never tell you they're at war with you. Unless you're
No.
species 8472.
But diplomacy is irrelevant.
Yeah, they don't want your diplomatic distinctiveness,
No,
particularly.
no. Yeah, chit chat is irrelevant.
But it's interesting because that's like a war that can never end, essentially.
With 8472?
No, with the Borg.
Oh, yeah. No, there's no
They're
end to
always
that.
going to seek to assimilate you.
Yeah, I think the only thing you could possibly do with the Borg is get sufficiently strong that you can just repel them. But you can that's just a brinksmanship game.
Yeah, and that's just
Because the Borg are never going to stop developing themselves.
so that's just like the guaranteed and endless militarization of Starfleet, essentially.
Right? Essentially assured destruction. Not just mutually, but for everybody. Yeah. And I mean, you know, those themes of the Cold War, I think, are a really powerful formational and sort of foundational influence for how Star Trek views war. And especially in the sort of deep reaches of space, I can imagine wars being cold for an awfully long time.
Starfleet and the Romulans.
Right? And erupting into heat every once in a while.
Like as Cisco says to Vreenak, it's just like, you know, we can fight it out or we can just go back to being cold warriors. You know, that's been working for us forever, so...
It's been working for them essentially since Well, it fought the Battle of Charon early on in the Earth-Romulan War of the late 2150s, early 2160s. And then I think that ends with the Treaty of Algernon, doesn't it? Or that may be a later war, ends with the Treaty of Algernon, which is still in effect by the time the Romulans return in Season 1, Episode 26 of The Next Generation, which is the treaty that specifically forbids the Federation, of course, from
having cloaks.
And does no such thing to Romulans, because they already had them.
And they were not going to agree to it.
Nope. No, they weren't. But, the Romulans end up with a different kind of end to their Cold War with the Federation. Because it seems that after the Dominion War, the Romulans returned to something like the posture they had adopted before the war, but with more contacts. The sort of wall of silence was broken.
Does seem so. They were forced to work together for a while. So.
Yeah, and I think that ability to work together and to trust the Federation when they really had to, I think maybe what caused them to reach out to the Federation for help. And I wonder if that wasn't through Spock. I think it may have been through Spock that they reached out for help.
They had their operatives from Romulus as well, like Corval.
That's true. Yeah.
And working the Romulans at their own game as well.
Yeah, it's true. And, the Romulans and the Federation are one of the places where you can see some of the sort of dirtier sides of. It's like the Federation's dirty boxing as opposed to its Queensberry rules kind of fighting.
Picard and Tomalak exercise Queensberry.
Oh, very much. Absolutely. They may even be exercising the gentlemanly art of Bartitsu. Use a cane as opposed to slapping at each other with their meaty paws. Yeah, and when it really ends that position for the Romulans is the destruction of Romulus. And after that, I think they're not the same kind of force at all. Because their government seems to have been, well, there must be a certain level of decentralization to govern an interstellar empire.
But
it was pretty
be very centralized
in terms of its sort of command hierarchy, or hierarchy of power.
Well, the Federation would be fine without Earth, certainly not nearly as crippled.
Oh yeah,
because
if
the Sol system exploded,
they'd still have memory alpha and all sorts of other stuff, right, that they could draw on to make sure they had a documentary continuity and a chain of succession and all that stuff laid out, right? Yeah, when the Romulan Council and that sort of stuff are killed, it's catastrophic. And then Romulus, Remus, and the entire system, plus I think a number of star systems nearby, are disrupted or destroyed. It was the Hoba supernova or something like that.
The Romulan one?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like the Hobus star, was it?
That's what it's called, yeah. Hobus.
Well, there's another kind of war we've touched on in a past episode. Time war.
I thought you were going to say time loop, but no, and I'm glad.
I wouldn't.
Time wars.
The last kind of war you ever want to find yourself in.
Yeah, that's true. And we've seen varieties of time wars, from Enterprise's time traveling to enter an altered World War II.
To the temporal Cold War.
Yeah.
Which becomes the temporal Hot War.
Yes.
To Anarax and his time war.
Oh, yes, of course. And the Krenim time ship, yeah. These kinds of wars seem to... What they really do is sort of elevate the premise of defeating your enemies to erasing them from existence. Removing the cause of the war in the first place. In a certain sense, all of these things are asking a certain question about time, which is, if you could just go back and kill Hitler.
Well, that's what the Borg try in First Contact.
Yeah, absolutely. That's their plan. They, more than any, might have been able to pull it off, because they would never have stopped there. They would just assimilate that and head straight out from there. And just have another site from which to start 900 years earlier than they otherwise would have, or something.
Yeah. As we also mentioned before, it's hard to decide if or figure out if there's actually a beginning and end, or a resolution to a time war.
Well,
How do you go back and erase all the damage if you did come to an agreement?
precisely. I
Well,
think
that's what Anthrax is trying to do. And as he's shown, you can't ever get those strings quite right. You know?
yeah,
Okay.
you really can't.
Or so, as far as we know.
Yeah, I mean, really, the only way to end a time war is to never start it. But that, I think,
If you
opens
could
its
pull that
own
off. If-
problematic regress, which could become infinite, right? And I suppose you're right. Like that's the problem. We've fallen into a time.
Oh, damn it.
We need
Okay.
to get out of here.
All right. How about
Engage the chronomatrix. Engage the chronomatrix.
How about
I
a different
said.
kind of endless war?
Okay, good.
Battle lines, DS9.
Oh gosh, like the worst side of resurrection ever. But in
And
a certain
decision
sense,
making.
They live in Valhalla in a certain way.
Yeah.
Just crappy low rent Valhalla.
Yeah.
No drinking horns. No.
That's somebody's ideal Valhalla, perhaps.
Maybe. Floats your boat or spins your planet.
Good
But yeah,
enough for Opaka.
Battle lines is it's an interesting comment on both the sort of bottomlessness of conflict that way when it's sort of based on a kind of historical hatred and enmity, but also the way in which those things can be engaged to produce a kind of sustainable or literally endless war where it can always be stirred up again.
Well, what they say is that they were put there.
Yes.
So with that, they don't really go into much more detail about that. But what that suggests to me is because it's the Gamma Quadrant that either the Dominion put them there just to be rid of them because it was just too chaotic for their ordered empire.
Yeah.
But you'd think they would probably just annihilate them. So what it suggests to me is the people on their own worlds perhaps found peace, and these were the two factions of either side that could not stop fighting.
That's
And
what
so
I had
they
suspected.
expelled them, which is interesting.
Although your suggestion about the Dominion doesn't go amiss, because I mean, who else would you engage to fundamentally change somebody's biology?
True.
You know,
Well, yeah, they
a
could have worked
a
with the
founder
Dominion.
may have been one of the people that helped them do that,
Yeah.
or some
Or
Vorta that showed up.
Wayun.
Indeed.
Wayun won.
Oh, Wayun.
Or Kevon.
It's true.
Or Eris.
What is Iggy Pop's Vorta name?
I forget his name, but he's a good
I'll find it.
he's a good Vorta though.
Yelgren.
Yelgren. Of course.
Yelgren the Vorta.
How could we have forgotten?
What a memorable name.
Yelgren.
But yeah, that perpetual war is a kind of foreshadowing in some ways for the whole series, right? Like the Pa Wraiths and the prophets are locked in a kind of, essentially a kind of cold war, spiritual cold war or struggle. The Dominion locks itself into conflict with whatever it needs in order to sort of subvert and dominate it.
And out of fear.
And out of fear, yeah, absolutely. They're essentially driven by fear of solids.
Because of past persecution.
Again,
Or so
past
they say.
wounds and trauma, right?
Yep.
And that brings us to
There are a bunch of Captain Maxwells running around as founders.
well, and you know there is a real phenomenon called the intergenerational transmission of psychopathology, which can happen in families. It can happen in locations or cultures or peoples, and the kind of, I don't know, it necessarily even needs to be a psychopathology, right? This could just be the intergenerational transmission of trauma or of tradition, right? But if your tradition is fear of the solid because they'll always hate you and try and get rid of you, then that tradition, becomes a kind of end unto itself almost, right? You've always got to secure against it.
The Dominion War.
Certainly, I think the worst war the Federation has ever seen.
The closest they ever came to losing the Alpha Quadrant
Absolutely.
and Beta Quadrant.
Yeah. Certainly rejigged the political map of the quadrant. The Breen became much more major players.
And the Betazoids less so.
The Betazoids become a traumatized people.
And also the Geez, who else was working with the Dominion? The Baku, or not the Baku, but the
Oh, yes. The Sona.
Sona.
There are a number of species that eventually sort of make agreements, or at least non-aggression pacts, or all sorts of things with them.
A lot of Borg-like force in the sense that they just want their type of order, and they've achieved it in their own quadrant, or at least most of it.
Yeah.
And now they feel threatened by this wormhole, so...
Yeah. Although, you know, the thing that does occur to me is that we don't know what the disposition of that brain technology was.
That just nullifies the weapons?
Yeah, after the Dominion War. I mean, I wonder if the Dominion didn't scoot one of those ships back through the wormhole, you know?
Yeah, true.
Inadvertently made life much worse on the other side of the galaxy.
Well, they sort of suggest at the end of DS9 that maybe they take a little more peaceful approach after that, potentially, because Odo's there with them and things like that.
I'd hope so, yeah. Yeah. And Odo's would be, I can only assume, a very unique and effective voice in their midst.
Better than Laws. He's kind of a jerk.
Yeah. He's happy just flying in space, I think.
Stabbing dudes Terminator style.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. That was pretty Terminator style. Yeah, the Dominion War really challenges the Federation, I mean, ethically, once we learn again about Section 31's involvement, but also, you know, just in terms of its overall morale as a culture. Like, you see that in the way in which the war grinds on. I was commenting with my spouse and I are watching the last few episodes of Deep Space Nine right now. We've been rewatching the whole series from beginning to end. We've just sort of gotten to, I think, 7:22 or 23. And I forget whether it was me or anyway, one of us looked at the other one and said, "Can you imagine if we'd had another season and a half of the Dominion War? It would have been amazing, but it would have been also hideously depressing."
Yeah.
It would have been kind of brutal. I mean, although I bring it on.
I would watch it.
I would watch it every day of the week. I already do.
Nog's back in action.
Right? Captain Nog. Yeah, the scale and the immensity of the war, the enormity of it, I think, is exhausting for the Federation.
Essentially kicked off by the Tal Shiar and Obsidian Order. That strike is kind of the big first strike that kicks off the hot war.
Yes, absolutely. The Dominion had been making moves for a long time before that, of course.
But just strategic ones and
yeah, laying their groundwork, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that disastrous incursion is, but as we know, also was concocted as a false flag, essentially, by the Dominion themselves, to draw those fleets out, destroy those two intelligence groups, and humiliate and expose them, and make it easier to make their way into the Alpha Quadrant. It certainly shows the kind of strategic thinking and what Sun Tzu would call formlessness, I think, of the founders. And I mean, that's that's like a pun, and I meant it, but and I don't repent it, but
oh no, too far.
Repent it. Anyway,
ooh, recovery.
Thank you. But yeah, the founders' very difference is kind of what lets them operate a bit outside the box that way, and that this would be their tactic is, I can only imagine the sort of Romulan Senate looked at that and said, "Oh, I wish we'd thought of that one, because we totally would have done that. That would have been like the Romulan plan of all Romulan plans."
And you can sprinkle a little war with the Klingons in there, or at least some skirmishes with the Klingons.
Yes.
But then you get them on side, and that's fun. You have some Tovok Dok.
Yes.
Exchange your warrior's spirit and strength.
Yes.
Which kind of brings us back to the Negvar days, which we were
reliving off
the top there.
Yeah.
Which perhaps we could translate for the people.
All right. Now, I confess, I have not sung this in translation since the Negvar days, but I can try and dust it off. When I go into battle, I just go for the full Klingon.
Oh, sure.
I think English translation is very much in order in this case.
Hear, sons of Kahless, Here, daughters, too. The blood of the battle washes clean the warrior brave and true. We fight, we live, and then we kill. Our lives burn short and bright. Then we die with honor and join our fathers in the Black Fleet, where we battle forever, battling on through the eternal fight.
Just doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
And transmission.
So many glitches. I don't know what happened.
It
We were talking about glitches too much.
well, maybe it was
Holodeck glitches. You cannot invoke them.
glitch gremlins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I heard one of the bar staff talking about it the other day. Glitch gremlins.
Oh no. It's one of the Ferengi Raiders?
Yeah. Yeah. I forget his name. Not Mr. Holm, that's another guy.
It's Red Corpse.
Cheers.
To Stompy.
Oh, Stompy.
Hear that, everyone?
To Stompy!
Stumpy! The minstrel boy to the war is gone. In the ranks of death you will find him. His father's sword he hath girded on, and his wild harp slung behind him. Land of song, said the warrior bard, though all the world betrays thee, one sword at least thy right shall guard, one faithful heart shall praise thee. The minstrel fell, but the foeman's chains could not bring that proud soul under. The harp he loved never spoke again, for he tore its chords asunder, and said, no chains shall sully thee, thou soul of love and bravery. Thy songs were made for the pure and free, they shall never sound in slavery.
Davan!